Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Your Brain at Work Live, our Connect with Olam Agri session. My name's Kendra Strodwick, and I'm the Head of Learning in APAC for the NeuroLeadership Institute. It's a pleasure to be with you today and looking forward to seeing some familiar faces. We often have some regular attendees and perhaps we've got some new attendees. So why don't we get to know each other as we're all dialing in and settling in before we meet our special guest today. Please type into the chat where you are joining us from. We often have quite a global audience because of the time of this session. So type into the chat, let us know where you're joining us from, and also how long you might have been part of NLI's family. We love first timers, so if this is your first NLI webinar, please let us know that so that we can acknowledge you. So we've got Australia well represented. Thank you for letting us know what lands you're joining us from. Kia ora to our Kiwi folks. Hervey Bay, oh, now I'm thinking of the sunshine because it is very, very cold in Sydney at the moment. Thor and I have been freezing on our walks. I'm sure it might be a little bit chillier in Hobart, Tasmania. Welcome, Marion, Holly, Renee, Bangalore, Pallavi, nice to see you here. Welcome. Oh my goodness, Millie's here from Texas, Dallas, Texas. I'm not sure what time it is for you, but I think it might be a little bit late. That's dedication for you. Welcome from Malaysia. Welcome from Singapore. Judy's a first timer. Welcome, Judy. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, welcome. Let us know how long you've been part of the NLI family. Myself, it's about 20 years. It's 10 p.m. Okay, yes, that is dedication. Nikki, 6 years. That's quite some time. We appreciate your loyalty and thank you for choosing to spend the next 50 minutes with us. So what have we got in store for you? We've got a nice fireside chat, so it's a little bit informal. We have closed the audio lines, so you're not able to communicate with us verbally, but you are able to use the chat, you are able to use the Q&A function. So at any stage you like, please just pop your thoughts there and ask your questions as we go. You know the drill perhaps by now, you co-create these conversations with us, so we will steer the conversation where you would like it to go. Given we have a couple of first timers here, please allow me to introduce the NeuroLeadership Institute, the company that we are representing today. You're in safe hands. We've been around since 1998. Our mission is to make organisations more human through sharing the science, more human and high performing. Our co-founders, David and Lisa Rock, started the business in Sydney and now we have spilled out across 24 plus countries. David Rock, our CEO and co-founder, will be in town again very, very soon in Australia. We're doing a mini summit tour focused on leadership development. And perhaps if you've got some questions around our newest publication and newest thinking around accountability, compassionate accountability, it might be a great opportunity to come along and ask some questions there. So if you're interested in more information about the mini summits in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, there is a QR code on your screen. But today, we have a very special guest and there is someone far better placed to introduce her than myself. The reason that we even have this relationship with Olam Agri and Paddy is because of our senior sales consultant, Belinda, based in Singapore, and the fantastic work that the Singapore crew are doing. And thanks for popping in, Belinda, to introduce Paddy today. There is no one better placed to do this. Over to you.
Thank you, Kendra. Hi, everyone. Once again, I'm Belinda, and I'm based in Singapore as a senior sales consultant here for NLI Asia Pacific. It really brings me great pleasure today to welcome Patty and to really have her time with us today to be on the webinar today. And let me really just let you know how Patty, how experienced she is in our industry. Patty has been a seasoned leader in talent development, D&I, and learning for over 20 years, and she has really truly a whole mess of global HR experience. She's also a certified coach and facilitator. And what she do really, really well in all the organizations that she has been to, leaving different legacies, is she really excels in enhancing organizational culture, building key capabilities, and leading change initiatives. So currently, she's the global head of learning organization effectiveness and D&I at Olam Agri, where we know Olam Group has just recently won a spot at the Fortune 500 companies list in Southeast Asia. So congratulations, Patty. And, she has also really led impactful roles at organizations such as Standard Chartered Bank, Dyson, Merck, where she really led significant talent and cultural change transformation. And that's why we thought there's no one better to join us today, Patty, to talk about, how we have worked with you, how your journey has been like with us, and, it's just really happy to share, with all our NLI community about you today. So over to you, Patty and Kendra. Thank you.
Welcome, Patty, and congratulations again on Olam Group's Fortune 500 number 5 spot I saw. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Kendra. Thank you, Belle, for the introduction. It's wonderful to be here today.
Patty, before we meet Olam Agri a little bit more intimately, there's just a few questions that I like to ask so that we can build some relatedness and get to know you on a bit more of a personal level. So the first question I like to ask everyone, because I'm a bit of a bookworm, is what's the book you're reading at the moment?
It's just an interesting one. So I'm reading A Little Lives that's given by my daughter that she wants me to read. She says it's a tearjerker, so I can't wait to get past the book. It's about three friends in New York who are finding their way. People from very different parts of someone from art, and then there is JP who's each one from a very different side, and how they're supporting each other on that journey. So yes, very exciting. I'm in early pages. I'm somewhere in page 43. I see some of you have read the book, so I'm pretty much starting off into the book here.
Well, as someone that's curious about people and their stories, no doubt you'll enjoy that. The second question I like to ask everyone is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, personally or professionally?
Yeah, Kendra, I think this is an advice I give my daughter. So my daughter is 19 and she's studying with University of Toronto. So the one thing that I tell her is perhaps would be the advice I would give to my younger self or to others at large. I think and this is the headline is network and connections. Yeah. So I just want to underline the importance of network and connection early on. As you work your way through the organizations and as you work into your seniority, the one thing that holds you together, the one thing that gives you that next role when you move to seniority, is the one thing that gives you that ecosystem and comfort is actually your networks. And 18 years, 15 years, 20 years into the job, you can't start your network. You need to start your network right from when you are in high school. You need to start your network in your internships. You need to start and continue to engage and connect with them. So that would be one thing. So your network indeed is your net worth. And you've got to start early and do it in an authentic way.
Oh, brilliant advice. Thank you, Patty. And look, Regina has already taken the cue. I'm going to ask everybody to put into the chat, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, personally or professionally? Let's tap into the wisdom of the 100 people or so that are going to be on the line today. Type into the chat, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, personally or professionally? For me, directness is the privilege of intimacy. Directness is the privilege of intimacy. So if you've got quite a direct leadership style, then you need to work on the intimacy as well, in order to ensure people receive your message with the intent that you want to give it. So that was a good piece of advice. Let's learn a little bit more about Olam Agri, if we could. So I'm going to pop a little bit of a slide up here for you to speak to, Paddy. And for everybody, the session overview, what we're going to cover today is the lessons learned as Olam Agri launched their coaching culture and used the Connect program to help them do that. We're going to talk a little bit about what the Connect habits are, and of course leave plenty of time for questions and some announcements right at the end. But Paddy, tell us a little bit more about Olam.
Yeah, so we're talking about an organization that is actually impacting everyone here on the call today, because we're talking about food, we're talking about food security for the world. And our purpose is about building the food, sustainable food to transform the food, feed, and fiber for a more sustainable future. So we're talking about the future for all of us on this call and far beyond. Underscoring the word sustainable. So we're not in the business of just making money, but viably, doing it responsibly and making it viable for the generations to come.
Thank you. As you said, it's something that's going to impact all of us. And so thank you for your focus on sustainability. Are you ready to get into a little bit of a chat here around your Connect journey and perhaps even where you started? So what were you solving for originally before kind of landing on Connect as a solution?
Yeah, actually, it started, Kendra, from a point of culture. It wasn't, so we did not, when we embarked with Connect, and why that really struck a chord with us in the very first conversation is because we as an organization are embarking on a journey of the cultural journey. And specifically in culture, we're talking about wanting to have a listening culture, listening specifically all the way through within the organization, building for collective wisdom, and not just the channels from the top in terms of communication, but all the way through the organization. And therefore, we wanted to find a way to engage. We wanted to make sure that we give a structure and tool that people could use. So, back to the quote, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by the impact they have on us. So, assuming positive intention, if the way we want to support our leaders at large is give them that structure, give them that the techniques for them to be able to do it best. So that's how we started that connection.
Oh, tell me a bit more about the listening culture. I'm sure everybody's keen to know how you might have gone about that.
Yeah, so I'm sure many of you are doing this in your organization in many ways, and you would identify with the fact that anything to do with culture is a multi-year journey. So this is more in terms of not all of the lofty things that we've done, but all of the things that some of the things that we've done to get us started. So first is one is we want to encourage feedback. We want to encourage insights in the organization. We want to listen more for various reasons. One is innovation. Second is we want to make sure that colleagues are engaged. So if you look at the retention of Olam Agri, we're very high. So we've got colleagues who are tenured 20, 22, 25 years. And that's literally your average tenure. People don't leave the organization. It's a great place to work, not just because of the certifications, but I can tell you, being a little less than 2 years in the organization, it's a great place. What happens, however, when you've got very tenured colleagues and long enough is sometimes you get very set in your ways. The tone from the top becomes, there is sort of a hierarchy and structure where sometimes you miss the opportunity of listening up from grassroots. This could serve us, but equally it could hurt us in some ways if we don't do it. For example, that's a huge amount of risk management, because, for example, the places that we operate in, for example, in Africa, in some of the emerging markets, it's very important to know what's happening on ground. We can't be sitting in Singapore in the headquarters and and feel like we know everything that's happening unless we've heard well enough. There could be, there could be some risks happening in the warehouse, things perhaps not in the right, the right stock showing up. It could be in the nature of the quality of a product. It could be some sort of fault lines in supply chain. It could be anything. But unless you're not listening up, you're spending disproportionate time trying to resolve it. And we want to reduce that time and bring the time to make things more productive. We want to bring more efficiency. So there is a business reason why we want to create a listening culture beyond a good to have. This was one of it. The second is we also corroborated this with our engagement survey. There is, and I know there's strong science that does suggest, and in the Connect workshops as well, there's referencing of the impact of managers having on people wanting to stay, right? And we really wanted to build that strength of engagement. So it's not about people leaving, but people wanting to bring their discretionary energy, wanting to not just comply with things, but to commit to things. For example, when we talk about working in a sustainable way, serving for the food, feed, and fiber, transforming it in a sustainable way. So we're talking about two balancing tensions here, right? We're talking about making sure that the business is viable. We're also talking about the fact that it needs to be done in a sustainable way. Now, the way we want to reach to our colleagues at large is we want to influence. It's not about persuading and telling them that this is what needs to be done, but why it needs to be done. They've got to believe in the cause for it. And that happens when you engage at a level that you appeal to their brain and, of course, in turn, the heart. And that's why this was so important for us. So we're doing at various levels. So we do these focus group sessions where we are co-creating the values. So the values was something that was introduced in the organization back in 2021 when the organization was split into three. So we have the Olam Foods, we have the Olam Agri, and the third, which is the other holdings and all those businesses that we're looking to responsibly divest, as well as the shared services. So the value statements got created back then, but it wasn't translated into the organization in the way it is understood. So if I'm going to talk about each of my values in terms of collaborative, agile, resourceful, entrepreneurial, and sustainable, I may understand it in a way, but it's perhaps not in a standard way that can be verbalized. Every leader may not represent it the same way. If it needs to be given as feedback, so for example, am I being, what is the spectrum of resourceful that's expected versus how am I operating? That conversation was not perfectly understood. So we co-created this. This was part of our opportunity to take every opportunity to listen. So we did 11 focus group discussions across the organization at different time zones to understand, to make those behaviors that go with those values as tangible expressions of those values. So wherever we can co-create, we do that. I think the other thing that we also looked at is what are those levels that could have the biggest opportunity. And I think that is part of the struggle that we had. We can talk about that. But I hope to some measure it did answer your question. So every opportunity is what we took.
Yes, thank you, Patty. And look, folks, if you've got other questions, because we've got such a wealth of wisdom here and experience, please pop them in the Q&A function so that they stand out from the chat, and we'll make sure that we notice them. You talked about engagement, Patty. I might just share some of the case studies or business case that's in the Connect program around why the quality of conversations matter, and of course the listening is the biggest part of that, or the quality of the partnership in the conversations. So you talked about engagement. Engagement, a direct manager can have as much as 70% of the impact on an individual employee's engagement. What a significant responsibility that is. And we've heard it before. People don't leave organizations, people leave people. 51% increase in productivity and revenue in coaching cultures. So you also talked about productivity. 68% of employees have changed jobs due to lack of learning, being the primary reason. And I don't think that the learning's not happening. I think that perhaps that everybody isn't as engaged and active and aware that they're being developed. There might be an assumption that, I'm leaving because I didn't get to go to the conference in Hawaii, therefore I'm not getting developed. But when we're aware of that and we're being coached day to day and we're having to think and challenge ourselves and innovate, then we're acutely aware of the development while it's happening. So there's some of the data. We do have a question that's come through. Let me have a little look at that. Listening. Yeah, please, Paddy.
A segue to what you just shared, Kendra, in terms of the impact that the listening culture has that you mentioned. I think one of the things what we really benefited from Connect as a program is we're not talking about quality conversations in a specific context or difficult conversation, but how to make this business as usual. How do you transform every conversation into a conversation that you're developing an individual? And that comes with practice. That comes with beyond intention. It comes with getting the right necessary tools to be able to do it in a structured way. And I think that's one of the things that Connect really served our organization.
Yeah, thank you. It's not isolated in this context or this context. This is conversational intelligence that we can use everywhere and make just a part of our BAU. Paddy, we've got a couple of questions. Bindu's focusing on the listening piece. Listening needs certain skills and orientation. Not all HR professionals can be in the listening role. What do you think?
That's an interesting one. I read somewhere that someone mentioned about one of the advice, which is playing to your strength, which I saw somewhere in one of the things. So I think we may not have all that is required, but it's important to find who are the people who could be we are an orchestrator as an HR person. We're not the one playing all of the instruments. So as our role as an orchestrator, it's to identify who are the people who could perhaps serve to move our agenda far and further. Who are these opinion makers? Whose voices could be heard more? Whose voices absolutely need to be heard? So trying to gauge the noise from the signals there, I think, is a huge thing that we can do. We don't have to be the expert on that.
Yeah, thanks, Paddy. Tracy, I noticed your comment in the chat, every conversation a coaching conversation. No, not every conversation's a coaching conversation. And we don't want to make it one, otherwise we'll be out of rapport. But I think every conversation requires listening and an open perspective and a collaboration. So it's not a one-way, it's a two-way. But please don't confuse. We're not saying everything's a coaching conversation. In fact, one of the habits is choosing the right approach for the conversation at hand and knowing what hat to wear. Lee's got a question here. How did you get buy-in from your leaders to commit to the process? Because it's quite an extensive process. Fantastic question. Thanks, Lee. Paddy.
Yes, indeed a fantastic question. And may I acknowledge that was the biggest challenge. Yeah. It's about sometimes you find a sharp enough reason why to get started. NLI did give us the reason. Connect as a program did serve to that as a large measure. Our struggle was where to get started. We decided then, let's just get started. Yeah, it's the most practical way for us was to do from the top. We said that our middle management, senior leadership, which is 2 down to our CXO, to our executive committee, is where they have access to what we want the top leadership they are experiencing what we want for the top leadership to be influenced. They have maximum access to leaders who are reporting to them, and they hold the biggest lever to make that change possible. So we said, which is that level that offers the strongest change management. And that's how we identified that level, which is for us, in our sense, it's our senior leadership, but it's not the senior most leadership. The important thing that we got after we put those sessions, in every session, one consistent feedback is our leaders should hear this. Our leaders should be running these sessions. And this has been a consistent participant feedback. So we want the approach that we've taken is show rather than tell. We don't want to go to right at the top to say, this is what we want, because intuitively they know. But when they're hearing from their leaders that, this is helping them, this is relevant, we know we can get the attention. So that's the approach that we've taken. And I think it is definitely helping to some measure.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. Judy's got a question around what can we do at a company level, at that individual leadership level, to improve retention and increase employee satisfaction?
Beautiful question. I think the answer lies in understanding the motivational drivers. And I think one of the things that we're doing, in fact, specifically through Connect, is helping leaders understand those motivational drivers so that we can support their engagement and retention. So, for example, if you look at the SCARF model, status could be something that could be important for me. And if my leader is able to identify that and adjust the conversation that speaks to that, I'm going to listen more. I'm going to feel more engaged. I'm going to feel more committed. So giving the structure like the SCARF model to recognize the motivational drivers is a huge tool that will really help in that direction.
It might make sense if I share just what the Connect program is, so that when we're talking in jargon, people know what we're talking about. So the Connect product sits in our talent and performance suite. We're in the business of creating habit activation at scale. So all of these solutions have 3 habits that are embedded one by one, with research summaries and practice tools between each module. Now, Olam is delivering the Hive format, high impact virtual experience. And so Connect is under the talent and performance suite. And there's 3 key habits and a model that accompanies each habit. So building partnership is where it all starts. And Patty talked a little bit about the SCARF model that helps us understand what the drivers of threat and reward are for all human beings. How do we engage and motivate people from the inside out? It also gives us an understanding around what are the accidental demotivators that we might trigger from time to time, or that are in the environment. So if we want to be our best selves in any interaction and show up, then this is the model that helps us understand and do that. The second habit of Connect is activating insight, activating innovation, new thinking, new ideas. So how do we tap into that? Now, as we said before, not everything's a coaching conversation. Some conversations are more tell-oriented, and some conversations are more ask-oriented. Sometimes we're solution-focused, future-focused, and sometimes we're looking back retrospectively and understanding what the problem is. So the TAPS model allows us to identify what's the appropriate role for the conversation. What strategy or approach is best suited. The third habit is being able to cultivate more growth mindset, particularly in challenging interactions or conversations. It's quite easy to bring a growth mindset when it's good news. It's harder to bring a growth mindset when it's not so good news, or we're a little bit fatigued from all the change that we might be going through. Now, the word prime might be unusual here, folks. Priming means how do we put an undercoat on so that the top coat sticks? So how we communicate as a leader sends signals that will either have someone bring their growth mindset or have someone bring their fixed mindset. How we communicate is very important, particularly how we listen. It's the space we hold. It's what we're tuning into. If we think that they can, we will listen to them very differently than if we think they can't. So that's the third habit of Connect, this focusing on learning piece. So I hope that demystifies what we've been talking about, folks. Now, Patty, you talked about getting buy-in being the biggest kind of challenge that you had to overcome. I would love to hear what are some of the other challenges that you had to overcome and how you might have gone about that.
Yeah. The second one for us, amongst many, is Kendra making it relevant. And I think that contextualizing is very important, particularly in our organization. Any program which is a lift and shift from an external platform, there is so much of an antibody reaction that, we are different and this does not serve to our needs. So what was the other thing that was important was to make sure that we understand why this is relevant and that is communicated onward. And because we did that, while typically for programs which are external programs, we don't get the sort of response rate. I think we internalized the program. We took the license and thanks to NLI, where we intended to scale it. We also contextualized it to our context, why this is important for us. We then had a huge uptake of the program where we said, let's try and, we did a pilot. We got the key opinion makers to go and talk more about it. We socialized it in our workplace and key groups. We then also made sure that our HR regional leaders across the globe understand what this is about and they advocate for it when they are soliciting nominations, for example. And we got oversubscribed, where we started out as, let's have one hive. We are now looking at 3 hives that we need to start to schedule for. This is just at the first round of soliciting after one experience. So yeah, so that was the second challenge, contextualizing it, particularly in an organization like ours. Third is, as you can imagine, it's important to scale it. We've got colleagues across 33 countries, different time zones. So scaling that was another concern. We didn't want something which is doing well in the headquarters, but cannot work its way through far and further into the organization. So this format of Hive, which is high intensive virtual experiences, bite-sized 90-minute format across 3 sessions, and all of that sustainment tools in between really helped us scale it in a way people are not feeling lost between the 2 sessions, but are actually using that as time to prepare for the next session. So I think that format is something that thankfully helped us on the third part, which is scaling. So buy-in, which was our first problem, the second being contextualizing it, making it relevant, and the third is scaling. So these were 3 of the big challenges that we did have.
Yeah, thank you, Patty. And I know you also created learning partnerships, like smaller pods for people to share and digest and talk about how they can apply the learning. And I've seen that that's been particularly well received as well.
Yeah, thank you for reminding. In fact, we had a session just yesterday. And one of the things that we're doing in our sessions is part of what we want to create it is as a listening culture and a coaching culture. After each session, we've created pairs or learning partner pairs where they talk to each other. And here we're talking about people from very different businesses. Food and fiber is very different from, the food and feed, is very different from fiber and industrial agri, because we're talking about where you've got plantation, you've got farms, versus something where you've got value adding and processing, for example, in the mills, versus you're talking about a trading organization. They're so distinct and unique that for long enough we've said that we are different, but bringing those voices together, listening not just within the echo chambers of what is familiar, but listening across those functions and businesses that are unfamiliar raises the level of listening. So we've also created these peer partnerships after the session that we've published and put out into the organization after each session.
Thank you. Thanks, Patty. Let me see. I've got another couple of questions coming through. I'm glad you like the dog. He's got the best life in the background. Patty, what advice would you give to other organizations who are trying to create more of a coaching culture?
Yeah, interesting.
Not an
one.
easy question, but what advice would you give?
Yeah, could I take this? Honestly, I've seen organizations of all of the programs that have been done. The one program which is more binary, works or doesn't work, is coaching, and that is because how it's landed, how people receive, how people experience coaching, and the early stories that go out into the organization either create an appetite for it, or people lose an appetite for it. We've in the past had a little bit of our fingers burnt on coaching many moons back. So when we had to relaunch coaching as a culture in the organization, it wasn't easy. But that should not deter you from trying and putting it out there. We found specific needs that we could title. For example, our profit center heads who are looking to pivot into the next level of leadership transformation. We looked at so it's how we could hyper personalize it to specific target groups and specific individuals, and make sure we have some strong stories out there. I'd suggest for coaching culture, try not to start with scaling. Don't worry about scaling. Try to go right, try to go deep, try to go small, so that the stories that come out of that multiply as success multipliers. Because getting it wrong, you lose the opportunity up front.
Yeah, Patty, and it all comes back to that buy-in piece at the start. And I want to reassure people that Belle and the team work closely with management to help get buy-in and build that partnership. So you're not going to be on your own. Why don't we tap into some wisdom from the audience? I would kind of love to hear how you might be tackling these challenges in your organization. So what's helped you lift the quality of conversations within your organization? Are you seeing similar challenges to Patty? Something else? Type into the chat. Just share your experiences with us. This gives you a break, Patty. Have a drink. And we'll let our audience do some heavy lifting for a moment and then come back with a couple of more questions if we can. So what's helping you lift the quality of conversations within your organizations or environments? Type into the chat. The niche has popped in here, focus group discussions, listening instead of telling. That's often the first campaign. We've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them proportionally. If we listen first. Thanks, Judy. Regular town halls, top down. Ooh, frank and fearless in the agenda. Thank you, Jocelyn. If it has a home, then it's more likely to happen if it lives in an agenda. Communications strategy. Thank you, Tracy. Yes, champions. It often takes a village, doesn't it? Offering perspectives instead of feedback. So Patty talked about the asking for feedback. I would love to get rid of the word feedback because it's about perspectives. Psychological safety. Yes, thanks, Lee. Linking to this. Transparency. Discussing the pros and consequences of the actual problem. Yeah, thank you, Geetha. Hope I'm pronouncing everybody's name correctly. Yeah, Don, thank you. Just the reframe of difficult conversations to helpful conversations, constructively challenging. Always maintain a general space of approachability. Yeah, thank you. Patty, we've got a question from Nikki. How did you go about identifying and leaning into the support of the early adopters, those that really engaged in the new approaches?
Yeah, the first session that we had was actually a face-to-face session that we had here at the headquarters, which were part of these are leaders who have pretty significant teams, who could be some of our, it's almost like you've got to wear a bit of a business development hat within your organization. We are L&D professionals, but we've got to make sure that our efforts are understood and we're serving to our customers and internal stakeholders. So the stakeholders where there was the biggest opportunity, who could gain the maximum, they were invited to the first pilot. So our intention was already who is the key audience, who could influence the key audience. So our first session was who could influence our key audience, and these were senior leaders. We did, to be fair, have the advantage of having our leaders here in the headquarters in Singapore, because we're a Singapore headquartered company. That did give us a bit of an advantage. But additionally, the regional cluster heads, learning heads, engaged pretty strongly with their HR business partners, with the business, to talk about what's been those first success stories. So there was a lot of sharing onward the experiences rather than here's the program. It was more pivoting on here's been the experience, so people identify with it and say, yeah, that makes sense to me. That really helped us quite a bit.
Thank you. Hope that answers your question, Nikki. And Judy's question, do you see any differences in the approach before or after COVID, especially when work styles have changed significantly in some areas post-COVID?
Yeah, and I don't know, many learning and talent professionals feel the same, but I think what started out as digital and what with a lot of face-to-face trainings phasing off, there seems to be, or that has actually not just been, that has actually created a new set of appetite for digital. People see that as being convenient. People see these virtual sessions, if conducted well, they see greater value in it. There seems to be, I don't want to use the word impatient, but there seems to be a greater appreciation for bite-sized, highly curated, well contextualized session. People don't want to give away a whole day out for a session or a program. So yes, there has been a big change pre and post COVID. It's as if the learning styles suddenly seems to have changed for people in the organization. That's been something that I observed. I'm curious to know if that's also been something that you all have been seeing across your organizations.
Yes, Patty, and it's a well-timed question actually, because I kind of prepared a slide on the impact, the measurable impact of this bite-sized learning. Not only is it easy to scale, but it's just an immersion over an intense period of time, focused on 3 things. It's accessible, and we're seeing some great results here. So you can see the Connect represented. This is across our average aggregate globally, 90% people reporting behavior change. So we measure behavior change percentage. So 90% of people are having better conversations after Connect. When we mass learning in an in-person event, we don't have as much time to digest it and experiment and come back and get the next piece. And of course, there are some benefits to in-person learning, of the quality of the connection, the building of networks, etc. But I don't think that this way of learning is going to go away anytime soon with results like that and impact like that. Yeah. So Patty, I've got one final question as we start to wrap up, and I'm sure we've got some more that'll come through. So I do want to make sure I leave time, but it would be remiss of me not to ask you how understanding the science kind of helps with the uplift.
That's a great question, Kendra, and that was one of the big reasons why we chose NLI. I have a background in industrial psychology, and I do strongly believe if we've got to get something to stick, it needs to be a habit. For things to become a habit, it's got to appeal to people's. People need to feel committed to it. It needs to feel relevant. It needs to feel something that they can identify with. And to that, you need the science. So the whole science of understanding, for example, the rewards and threats through SCARF, the whole science of what are the tools in which you can distill, what are those conversations which could be actually best suited for generating insights? How do you make sure that you don't lose them and you leverage them? And creating a clear way of that, one is makes it more sticky because there is science, and equally it's sustainable. It is not a one and done program, and it feels like it's a much better investment of efforts because you've not done a program that's been forgotten. You've created a habit that's here to stay, that's here to sort of have a life of its own. And that's what science does. It doesn't feel like a program, it feels like something you own up to, something that's part of your, like resilience is a new muscle. This sort of creates a new set of learning muscle in every participant. So science has a big role in that.
Yeah, thanks, Patty. We talk about culture being our shared everyday habits. Essentially, that's what it is. What I might do is just pop a little expression of interest slide up so that if people would like to find out more about the Connect solution that Patty's been talking about, or any of the other solutions that I showed earlier, or if you're interested in our coach education programs, upskilling as an individual, corporate membership, or you're not sure, you want to talk through the buffet with an advisor, let us know. There's also a QR code that you can click there. So I'll leave that up for a moment. Patty, what's your next challenge from here? Because the job's not done.
Yeah, this is plenty of challenge. I think we are with a couple of things. One is we're embarking on our journey of culture. We've just done a culture survey that's given us a huge amount of insights on which of those levers that can really help us with outcomes. We are now starting out on our journey of making our behaviors into tangible expressions are connected to the values. We're rolling out the values, the 5 values of the organization, and getting this strength of quality conversation, understanding the nuances of buy-in in this context is really helpful, because I think this is really going to help us get this embedded in the organization and help every colleague live the Olam Agri values in a much more stronger way. So that's our next interesting challenge that we are embarking on.
Oh, well, we certainly wish you all the very best, and appreciate the partnership and your time today and sharing your wisdom. Folks, you've got about 5 minutes left. If there is a burning question that you'd like to ask Patty before she goes, please pop it into the Q&A. I will share a couple of other announcements while I still have you. I'm coming to Singapore. Hopefully Patty and I can catch up while I'm there, have a nice coffee. Brain-based coaching is back in person in Singapore, 14th to the 16th of August. Would love to see some familiar faces while I'm there. If you would prefer a virtual option, then we are running Brain-Based Conversation Skills starting in July, and it runs over 8 weeks. Just one 3-hour session each week, 8 weeks, gives you nice time in between to practice and apply. So there's still space in this program. We obviously have a full schedule, so jump onto the website and have a little bit of a look if you need a little bit of a longer ramp time to look at your own professional development. Our summit, Evolve, is happening on the 29th and the 30th of October this year, virtually. Change is inevitable, adaptation is not. So we'd love to see you at our summit. Early bird pricing ends very, very soon. So if you've got a little bit of end of financial year budget, this might be a great way to spend it. They're always my favourite event on the calendar each year. Patty, we are almost at time. Let me see if I have any other questions for you. I think you're off the hook. Do you have any final remarks, any extra tips or wisdom that you would like to share?
I just want to firstly thank everyone on this call for joining today. It's been a great opportunity to connect with you and see all of those lovely questions and to get a bit of your wisdom through these chat windows. I want to first of all thank you all for this. I want to thank NLI for this opportunity to connect the learning HR professionals on this call today. And learning is continuous, learning is ongoing. So we have some early learnings and interests. Happy to stay connected to share with you what are the next challenges, which are just around the corner. So looking forward to learning more from all of you. Thank you again, Kendra.
Oh, pleasure is all ours. Thank you, Patty. Thanks for joining us, folks. Hope to see you again soon. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks' time, same channel at 12:30 Sydney time on the 11th of July. Hope to see you again then. Stay well, folks. Bye for now.